Good evening and welcome to Decisions Under Fire. I'm Geetika Raisen, and in this series, we explore how professionals think, decide, and act when the pressure is real and the consequences matter. Imagine an institute that has stored all student records in old paper files for 20 long years. Now, that institute decides to move everything to a digital system. Some records are missing, some names are spelled differently, some marks don't even match. Even if one record is wrong, a student's future could be affected. This is exactly what companies face when they move data from legacy systems to cloud. In this episode, we'll explore how analytics, cloud infrastructure, and migration decisions are made under pressure, how risks are managed when data business is critical, and what students should understand about real world data responsibility. Today, I'm joined by Mr. Bhaskar Malipuri, a senior digital technology leader with over 2 decades of experience in data analytics, large scale data migration, and cloud based data platforms. His work involves moving critical business data from legacy systems to cloud environments, ensuring data accuracy, continuity, and usability while supporting analytics driven decision making. These projects operate under strict deadlines and timelines. There's high risk and zero tolerance for data loss, while pressure handling is a major part of his role. Welcome to the podcast, sir.
Thank you, Geetika.
To start off with, could you tell us a little bit about what you do on a day to day basis?
Sure. Okay, so thanks for inviting me to this podcast, and I'm happy to be here. Okay, so I am the digital transformation leader working in the data and analytics area for the past decade, more than 12 years even. Right, they working across larger enterprises and helping them to uh, generate the digital revenue, growth and helping organizations to improve their customer experiences. This is primarily I deal with on my day-to-day job.
So, why do companies continue using old systems even when technology exists?
Right, see, the data is the new oil, right? I mean, this is every human being is carrying the data, right? Because of the smartphone evolution and the larger uh, the I would say that the every human being is is generating the lot of data, right? So the
Hmm.
companies need to understand what exactly he wanted it, and
Mhm.
how can actually they cross sell, upscale, uh, upsell their products, understanding his movements, understanding his interests. So if you like, if you're carrying a mobile or holding your laptop and then working on your laptop, scrolling something on the screen, shopping, uh, the companies are capturing every moment and use the data to produce the analytics out of it, which can actually bundle the offers to you and then display it, in the real time scenario. By the time you go to the next screen, you will see that something offer which really makes you interested, right? Because based on the clicks that you are actually going across the screen, those are captured, and they will understand your interest, and they will know that this offer can make you feel more interested, and then generate the revenue for the organization. So like in the legacy systems, what happens that this was not possible, right? And this requires a lot of integrations with a lot of different tools. So that's where the lot of organizations are now migrating to the either new set of tools, new set of enterprising tools, which can leverage these companies to use their data, because every company is actually sitting with the huge large volumes of data, right? But they don't know how to use it, what to do with the data. So this is a time for them to migrating to the new systems or new tools, where they can continue their day-to-day business and also exploit the data that they are holding to generate the additional revenue. It's like the next leg of growth of these companies depends on the how well they are using their data, or managing their data. So
Okay.
even for instance, they did not need to generate the dollar revenue, but they can also look at that how can actually they improve their customer experiences, right? So a lot of customers are leaving the organization, or I mean, they don't want to buy it from the particular company because of the customer experience as well, right? So these data helps them to make the decisions, easy for to understand the customers, the sentiment and mood, so that they can preempt a lot of revenue loss,
Mm.
approaching the customer, identifying much ahead of the time the problem and fix the problem even before customer knowing it. So that's where this data is driving across and major factor for all the organizations now.
Okay. Thank you. But I've come to see that data is a technical work. So data migration is often seen as a lot of technical work. So from your experience, where do you think the biggest decision-making risks appear during the migration projects?
See, every project comes with the risks, right? I mean, how well you define your risks is based on the success of the which helps the success of the project. So if you look at it, yeah, though it is a technical work, but decision making is a key factor, in these data projects, especially because the company is migrating from the legacy system to the new system,
Mm.
and they are maybe holding the lot of the data which is having a lot of issues. It's a kind of dirty data. It's a kind of the lot of null values, a lot of there is no correlation, because the legacy system comes with the there is no I would say that there was no checksums confirmed before in the legacy databases. A lot of issues there, right? If you're moving this data as is, right, that creates the problem. So your problem was there, and your problem will continue to be there. So you need to do a lot of validations and checks before you are actually defining your data strategy, right? So I would say that defining a data strategy is very important. Before defining your data strategy, you need to have the lot of work to be done in terms of the data audit. What is the volume of the data? What kind of problems that you can see? You take a chunk of the data and then you analyze the data. I know you can't do everything when you are before starting the project or before starting the engagement itself, but you can actually take the chunk of the data and then analyze it. What kind of problems are there. That phase we call it as the data audit and profiling, right? So
Okay.
if you look at this data audit and profiling, we will know that what kind of problems that we are going to see it when we start this project, right?
Mm.
So defining that phase is very, very important. We call it as a pre-data migration stage, where all these checks and audits are performed. Uh, you know, Based on the results of that phase, we will define our strategy. Whether should we go like the cleansing is required, or do we need to move entire data, or do we need to take the part of the data to the transform, or so those decisions will be made based upon the first pre-data migration stage results.
Okay.
And of course, you can also look at the how do you I mean, once the data is transformed, how do you migrate or go live, basically. That's what we call it as go live. Whether to run sometimes parallelly both the systems and see how everything is going fine or not, the records are matching, all those checks and validations will be performed. But again, the decision making here is that one is that why part is very important in the making the decision, right? Why this data to be, need to be moved, why this cannot be moved, right? What kind of tools that we need to use, right? So what kind of rules that we need to write to validate the data, to perform the testing, to perform the reconciliation, how many iterations are required to migrate the data. So these things all comes into the decision making, because if you can't define the scope of this, right, what happens that I mean, if you don't define these things in the planning stage, or based on that, you need to make some decisions, which way is the better. the cleansing only, or do we need to do entire ETL process, or do we need to do just retain the data? If that data is not much useful, then just keep the data in the as is, and then archive it, and then just move that into the cloud without any changes, and then store it there. So those decisions can be made, right, based on the pre data migration stage analysis. So we call it as the three stages, right? Data analysis,
Hmm.
and data execution, and then the validation, right? The loading comes later, right? The loading, we don't load it directly after the transformation done. So the loading comes before loading and transformation. There is a stage called, we actually deploy, push this data into the staging area, where we perform all these validations and checks.
Wow,
I hope
there's
I
a,
answered your question. If
yeah,
please interrupt me if anything that you don't understand. If you wanted me to more elaborate,
of
I
course,
am
of
happy to
course.
double click on.
Wow, I thought it was a lot of technical thing, but there's a lot of decision making too. You must decide how to validate it. It should be done immediately or should it be reviewed later? How how is the data integrity kept? There's a lot of decision making. So,
Yeah.
how do you decide whether to cleanse, transform, or retain data under pressure?
Right. It depends on the business value that is being generated. The approach should be the business driven approach, right? Just simply, it cannot be like, I know the technology, I just want to move, or, I'm
Hmm.
fascinated about putting the data into the cloud. It's not like that. It's not like that, right? No, the decision will be made uh, purely based on the business value. What value we are going to generate out of this activity, right? Like that. So,
So,
sorry, can you repeat your question again?
it was about how you decide on whether to clean, transform, or retain data under pressure.
Okay, cleaning. I would say that you need to. Okay, if the timelines are very short for you, right? The customer really wanted the system to be available, on the cloud, or on the new system. The data should be available to the new system by 6 months, or by 1 year. Uh, Generally, what we look at that, we look at the critical data, right?
Okay.
So the must haves, we look at it. So we look at the critical data. We define the data into two approaches, right? One is that critical data, and the other one is the deferred data. Which
Hmm.
is not necessary for the business to continue,
Okay.
right? Which is a good to have, right? But which is not necessary for the business to continue. So
Hmm.
we define that, and then we look at the critical data. If the timelines are too stringent and the customer really needed this data to be available on the new system, we focus on the critical data, and then look at that, whether the cleansing is required. Again, the same thing, the validation checks, all those things will be repeated again here. And then based on the results of that, we look at whether cleansing is required, or is it really required transform. Do we need really, do we really need to transform the data, or is it just like, uh, cleanse it and then load it? So
Hmm.
depends. So depends on the data analysis that we perform at the pre-requirement stage. Based on that, the decision will be made. But to answer your question, uh, the critical data will be identified if the timelines are too stringent, and then we will move only the critical data for the business to continue, and also business to access the data to generate the revenue. So, like,
Okay.
for example, if you look at it, a telecom customer, or our insurance customer, basically,
Hmm.
right? So I am raising complaint every month. The data is also captured in the database, right? Maybe in the trouble, some database name. I don't need the data to be transformed or migrated on the day one.
Hmm.
It can be deferred to the later stage. But
Okay.
my customer information, my name, my mobile number, my bank account number, all those data, and my address, all those details must have, right? All
Yeah.
those data points should be transformed, or should be migrated to the new system, so that my billing information will go to the new system. My address, if I am raising any complaint, that is available to the team, the compliance team. So those things, we'll identify the critical data and then move those data into the new system. And that's why we look at the, the uh, the challenging timelines, how we meet. So, this is also, uh, goes into the negotiation with the customer, right?
Uh-huh.
The customer wanted everything to be done at one go, right? So this all goes into the negotiation and then, convince the customer, let him know that, how this works, all of that.
So it's demand and supply at the base level.
Yes.
So after migration, analytic teams rely on the data, right?
Yeah.
How do you ensure insights remain reliable during and after the transition?
Right. So this is very important. Your data governance comes into the picture, right? How well you define your data governance framework. It actually helps you to produce the better data. We segregate this data into the three different stages, right? Silver, gold, and platinum, right?
Yes.
So and before silver, there is a raw data, right?
Hmm.
So and each data will have the more checks and balances, right? So
Hmm.
for silver data, we have a set of rules defined. Anyway, these rules are automated, because the large volumes we cannot play with manual checks,
Hmm.
running these rules. So we have certain rules written to validate this data, to perform some validations, and we categorize that into the silver. So, like, the quality increases, the more number of rules will be applied.
Hmm.
And of course, because once the data is also moved, you also need to look at the downstream systems, right? Whether is it integrated completely with the downstream systems, or are the downstream systems are working with the new data? Because you might have changed something, as part of your transformation journey, right? So the value changes should not have any impact on your downstream systems as well. So uh, right, to come back to this, we have these stringent rules written as part of your data governance framework. That also comes into the data quality as well, right? I know there are a lot of tools in the market now. You don't need to write a lot of sophisticated rules. All that, you plug in your data set, and then then automatically there are AI driven tools are there. So those tools are actually writing these some of the rules, and you just need to review that and then add enhance those rules, or add some more if you wanted more, more checks. That's how it is. So performing these rules and setting up your data governance framework is very, very important. To give the right analytics for the leadership to make the right decisions.
So, sir, you mentioned about downstream systems. Could you talk a little bit about that?
All right. So as I mentioned that earlier, that having my information, there is a customer information table, for example, right, and customer address. All those information will be staying in one data set. And then the my monthly billing cycle, right? My telephone bill, whatever comes, that comes into the billing system, right? So my information from the customer information system will be accessed by the billing system, right? There is a billing separate application will be there. So if I am changing a field value here from variable to character, or variable to integer, something like that, I'm just giving a vague example so that you can easily understand.
Yeah, yeah.
So that change should not have impact on the my downstream system billing system where they are consuming this data. So they would have written their code assuming that my name Bhaskar as in characters, right? Variable, and this I should not change this to the integer, because based on this variable or character type, they would have written their code. That's where it's very important that when you are transforming your data, right? So you should not change the core functionality of the business,
Mhm.
all right? So, and these downstream systems, after post transformation, integrating with these downstream systems and performing the integration testing is very, very important to make
Mhm.
sure that you are not breaking the other systems which is not which is outside of your
Yeah.
jurisdiction, right?
Yes, yes,
Right.
of
That's very
course.
important.
So, Faster cloud adaptation can bring business a lot of benefits, but I think there are a few risks also, right? So, what are these risks and how do you balance speed, security, and accuracy in such decisions?
See, in the data world, the risks, major risks are like this, data breach,
Hmm.
and are you complying with the regulations? So you look at that in the telecom world, there is the GDPR, General Data Protection Rules, and in the insurance world, HIPAA rules. There are a lot of regulations are there, right? HIPAA regulations and GDPR regulations. So are you complying with these regulations or not? So there are
Hmm.
different categories within the GDPR. There are different categories within the HIPAA, right? So HIPAA is basically for the insurance sector. So are you complying to these regulations or not is very important. If you're not complying, then you're screwed. So it's very important to make sure your application or whatever the ETL jobs that you are doing are compliant to these regulations, regulatory bodies, basically. So, like any sensitive data, you need to anonymize it before, you are exposing to the third party, because now the companies are also using the data as a revenue stream, right? So, and some of the companies are exposing their data to the outside the organizations as well, outside the organizations as well. They are kind of selling, upselling, right? So what happens that, but you are not supposed to expose the sensitive data to those guys, right?
Okay.
Because they just need to perform some kind of, for example, they wanted to understand in Bengaluru, they wanted to understand, where the footfall, the most footfall happens in the weekend,
Hmm.
which area, right? So that data they will get it from the mobile companies, right? Because the mobile signals, where majority of the populations go there, so they'll
Hmm.
give that kind of data to the marketing companies, outside marketing companies, basically, right? So those guys, for those guys, you're not supposed to expose a lot of data, your personal data, even your mobile number or your telephone
Hmm.
number, right? Your real name. So those things you're not supposed to expose to those guys, right? So you need to anonymize your data. So
Hmm.
sometimes, there are mistakes happens, right? If you perform some checks wrongly, then you tend to expose, those are the risks. And those are very big risks, right? Because
Yeah.
your data breach is a big crime, right?
Yeah.
So across the, so I think you need to, those risks, you need to manage it efficiently, and then, you need to make sure that there is enough validations are performed, and there is no good to have testing, right? When you are doing the testing, sometimes what happens is good to have kind of, testing is performed, but, there is no role for such kind of testing here, right? You need to perform stringent, and you need to perform the testing under stringent guidelines, and and perform a lot of checks. So the another thing is that, if you look at it, the data, when you are exposing to the outside, right? If you don't anonymize it, then there is a penalty to it, right? I mean, whether you are doing it or, you anonymize it or not, but still, you need to inform to the regulatory body that, I'm actually exposing this kind of data. So if you are even missing such a documentation step, also is a kind of a risk, right?
Hmm.
So, during these integrations, what happens? You need to completely, uh, define and, the ring fence your data, to before exposing to the external world.
So there's a lot of hard work there. You have to be very careful about what you do. So
Right.
cloud and migration risks are often underestimated by non-technical teams. How do you communicate these risks clearly to the decision makers?
Right, when you are moving the data to the cloud, right? Cloud is a different world. A decade ago, if you're looking at migrating to the public cloud is a sin, right? Everybody was afraid migrating their data to the cloud because of the security, what are the concerns?
Hmm.
But now, every company is looking at, every organization is looking at migrating their data to the public clouds, like, Google, GCP, or Amazon, AWS, even Azure. So, they are offering a lot of the security guidelines, a lot of guardrails to protect their data. So what happens here, when you are moving the data to the cloud, right?
Hmm.
So you need to define the strategic access controls.
Mm.
There is a principle called least privilege principle in the clouds, when you're having your data in the cloud, right? So that comes that, first anybody getting onto the cloud data warehouse or, cloud data access, he or she will have the least privileges
Mm.
on that particular application, even to access the data, to access the application, right? And then, it is evolving, right? 3 years ago, it was like a role based. If I am a superior in the organization, then, based on my role, maybe I would have granted, the complete access to the system, right? Even though I don't need it, right? Because if somebody is, senior or he's a CEO, he need to have full access. It is not good for him or she to, requesting for granting the access and all. But now, the past 2 years, it is changed. It is like, the attribute based access, like, the same system. Even if I'm attributes access management means, you define the access at an attribute level. Even though if I am a CEO of the company, but I will not have access to the data unless until my attributes are set in that particular data set, or in that particular the data where I'm accessing it, right? So that actually helps that, that is also one more thing. Second thing is that, for example, in UK, you are not supposed to access the UK application data from India, or even vice versa, right?
Mm.
So what happens that, I am in India, but the data is residing in UK.
Mm.
So uh, the access controls takes the geographical coordinates as well, from the
Mm.
network, and see where I am requesting the access or where I am reading that particular data set. Based on that, they will, if I'm reading it from India, though I was in UK, for example, I was having the access to this particular data set,
Mm.
but I travel to India and I try to access it, but I am not supposed to. I
Yeah.
will not have access to it
Mm.
because of the attributes changes there. My geographical coordinates are set as an attribute, one of the attribute. So my geographical coordinates changes, and then I will not have, my access will be removed, or I won't
Mm.
be having access to it.
Mm.
So, this attributes based access management came into the picture 2 years ago, and now it is evolving, right? So basically, in the cloud systems, of course, when the incident happens, communicating to the decision makers, that is separate, right?
Mm.
You know that's basically problem has occurred, and
Yeah.
how to deal with that problem, how to mitigate that risk, how to handle that problem is a different thing. But now,
Mm.
what I'm telling you is that, how to prevent that problem is most important,
Yeah.
right? So even for example, in the data migration projects, if I'm going live, right, before even going live, you need to perform. We make sure that, we capture every moment of the go live activity, right? We
Mm.
perform the dry run 1, dry run 2, dry run 3,
Mm.
until we get satisfied, right? And we record each and every action, small delay also into the run book. There is a book called run book, which is maintained and later handed over to the support teams for day-to-day management of the application. But all those details are captured in that run book, so that, when we are actually performing the go live or cutover, uh, taking this application into the live, at that time we know that, we have already performed 2 or 3 times the dry runs, dress rehearsal, whatever we call it as. um, 2 or 3 times we already performed, and still there are maybe a chances, to hit a roadblock, and for
Mm.
that we need to have the proper rollback mechanism, right?
Of course.
So we always take the goal image of the application, running application, so that, if something goes wrong, we will restore that gold image, so that, the business is not interrupted. Maybe your new changes may get delayed, deploying into the production or live, but your existing business is not, interrupted or disrupted, so that, your business continuity will remain same. So then,
Mm.
it's easier to, tell the decision makers, basically, to make them understand there is no business impact, the business continuity is on, so there is no revenue loss. So then explain the problem to them, right? So what happened, where went wrong, and all that. But again, we should be always confident about our training. Our training is nothing but dress rehearsal, dry run that we run to
Mm.
get the confidence, to know that what kind of problems that we hit. So all those things, with that confidence, I think uh,
Mm.
it is easier. I would not say easier, but we can confidently go and deploy these changes into the production or life. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Could you tell us in a single line what students should understand about data responsibility before working with analytics and cloud systems?
I think most importantly, I would say that accountability, right?
Okay,
Yeah,
so
understanding that how ethically one should use the data
hmm,
and how responsibly one should use the data. So these are the three things that I would say that keep that in mind when you are dealing with the
thank you.
data. Very
Sure,
very sensitive and responsible, accountable, and ethically correct.
of
These
course.
things, and of course, don't go about fancy about I know the technology, I wanted to implement it.
Hmm,
Unless there is a business value in it.
of course,
Even
teamwork
the
matters.
most recent technology, you know it, but don't implement it unless you see the business value in it.
Thank you so much for coming here and having this talk with us. It was very informative. Thank you, sir.
Nice talking to you, Geetika. Have a
Thank,
good day.
thank
Wish you all
you.
the best.